Picture this. You are the captain of a massive oil tanker. Your ship weighs over 200,000 tons. It's carrying hundreds of millions of dollars worth of crude oil. You have a crew of 25 people depending on you. And out of nowhere, in the darkness, you see them. Small, fast, no lights, no radio contact, just engines screaming across the water towards you at over 100 miles per hour. Before you can react, they open fire. That is what happened in the Strait of Hormuz last weekend. That is what's been happening for weeks. And that is why the most powerful navy in the history of the world is struggling to stop it. Because Iran isn't fighting with battleships. Iran isn't fighting with submarines. Iran isn't even fighting with its air force. Iran is fighting with speedboats. Tiny, cheap, fast, almost invisible speedboats. Hidden in caves, tucked into island coves, ready to launch in minutes. And they are absolutely devastating to global shipping. Today, I want to explain exactly what Iran's so-called Mosquito fleet actually is, where it came from, how it works, why the US military, with all of its billion-dollar warships and satellite surveillance, cannot simply make it go away, and what it means for the global economy as long as this crisis continues. Let's get into it.
So first, what exactly are we talking about when we say the Mosquito fleet? The name says it all, honestly.
Think about trying to kill mosquitoes with a sledgehammer. That's the problem the US Navy is facing. The IRGC Navy relies on small, fast boats hidden in fortified bases along Iran's coastline or on islands in the strategic waterway. Iran claims some of its boats can reach speeds of more than 100 knots, about 185 kilometers per hour. For context, that is extraordinarily fast for a watercraft. A US Navy destroyer, one of the most capable surface warships in the world, has a top speed of around 30 to 35 knots. These speedboats are 3 times faster. They are built light. Many are made from fiberglass rather than steel, which means they generate almost no radar return. On a radar screen crowded with wave clutter and legitimate small fishing boats, they are nearly indistinguishable from background noise.
Thoughtful fiberglass-hulled small boats operating at sea level return a radar cross-section comparable to wave clutter, making them difficult to distinguish from the sea surface in waters where hundreds of legitimate small craft operate daily. The Gateway Pundit. And here's the thing that makes this even more difficult. These are not purpose-built military vessels in a traditional sense. Iran's earliest boats in this fleet were civilian vessels that were converted and fitted with machine guns or grenade launchers. Over time, purpose-built boats were developed along with mini-submarines and unmanned surface vessels. UNET News. So you're not looking for something that looks like a warship. You're looking for something that looks like a fishing boat, until it doesn't. The tactics are simple and brutally effective. The IRGC Navy works like a guerrilla force at sea. Instead of relying on big warships and classic naval battles, it depends on hit-and-run attacks. A Sharq al-Awsat swarm. Strike. Disappear. Repeat.
Now here's the part of this story that I think most people don't know, and it explains why even relentless US and Israeli airstrikes haven't neutralized this threat. These boats don't sit in open harbors where satellites can spot them. The vessels are docked along piers within deep caves excavated along the rocky coastline, ready to be deployed in minutes. INET News. Read that again. Deep caves, cut into the coastline, with internal docking piers. This isn't improvised. This is a deliberate, decades-long infrastructure project. Iran has been building these protected naval facilities since the 1980s, specifically designed to survive aerial bombardment and remain invisible to overhead surveillance. And it's not just the mainland. The IRGC has built at least 10 fortified and well-hidden bases for the fast boats spread across Iran's island network in the Persian Gulf. INET News. Remember from our previous videos, Iran controls 7 major islands in and around the Strait of Hormuz, including Larak, Hormuz, Keshem, Hengam, Abu Musa, Greater Tumb, and Lesser Tumb. These aren't just diplomatic territories, they are active military staging grounds for exactly this kind of operation. The IRGC Navy's base on Faroe Island, for example, serves as headquarters for its elite naval commando unit, Fondation pour la Recherche Stratégique. So picture it this way. You have a network of fortified island bases and cave facilities stretching across the entire eastern entrance to the Persian Gulf. Boats can launch from any one of them within minutes. They scatter, attack, and vanish back into terrain that is almost impossible to surveil effectively from the air. Even when a strike does hit a facility, the boats themselves are small enough that many survive in adjacent caves and coves.
You can destroy a base and still have dozens of active vessels you never found.
To understand why this is such an effective strategy, you have to go back to where it was born. The IRGC Navy was formally established in 1985 during the Iran-Iraq War. From its founding, it prioritized asymmetric maritime warfare through the use of small, fast attack craft, anti-ship missiles, naval mines, and hit-and-run tactics, rather than traditional naval engagements, what analysts describe as a guerrilla navy. And the reason for that is very deliberate. After watching what the United States military did to Iraq's conventional forces, and after experiencing their own encounters with the US Navy during the 1980s, Iranian military strategists concluded something that shaped everything that came after. They became convinced that Iran could not win a direct conventional naval confrontation with the United States. So they built something different, something that doesn't try to win head-on, something designed to make the cost of operating in these waters so high, so unpredictable, and so exhausting that it effectively deters anyone from trying. It's the same philosophy that guerrilla forces have used against more powerful conventional armies on land for centuries. You don't need to defeat the enemy. You just need to make them bleed enough, often enough, that the calculation changes.
Jane's Defence, one of the most authoritative open-source defence references in the world, recognises the IRGC Navy as the most prominent practitioner of small boat swarm tactics, combining speed, mass, coordinated manoeuvre, low radar signature and concealment among all naval forces in the world. Wikipedia, that is not a small distinction. That is the world's leading defence reference, calling the IRGC Navy the global leader in this specific type of warfare.
Now let's look at what the US military itself says it has accomplished, and then look at what that actually means. Earlier this month, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff gave a detailed briefing on Operation Epic Fury. The statistics were genuinely staggering. More than 13,000 targets struck. Over 80% of Iran's air defense systems destroyed. More than 90% of Iran's regular navy sunk, including 150 ships. Approximately 80% of Iran's missile production facilities destroyed. Nearly 80% of Iran's nuclear industrial infrastructure hit. By conventional measures, that is extraordinary devastation. And there's no question the regular Iranian Navy, what they call the Artesh Navy, the surface combatants, the frigates, the corvettes, has been decimated. But here's where it gets complicated. There are two separate Iranian naval forces, the regular Artesh Navy, which is effectively gone, and the IRGC Navy, the Mosquito Fleet, which is not. The practical conclusion from defence analysts is that Iran's formal naval warfighting capacity is largely destroyed, while its capacity to deploy armed speedboats against tankers, drawn from a pool of uncertain but substantial size, has not been meaningfully degraded. The Gateway Pundit. Even by the US military's own admission, only about half of the IRGC's small attack boats have been neutralised. And that's using a baseline that was never precisely defined. The pre-war size of the IRGC small boat fleet is genuinely unknown, with figures varying dramatically. The only verified Western estimate comes from a 2007 US Office of Naval Intelligence assessment that put the number at over 1,000 speedboats, described at the time as a growing fleet. The Gateway pundit, if the actual number is significantly higher, and some estimates suggest it could be, then destroying half still leaves hundreds of active, armed, fast attack vessels hidden in coastal caves and island bases throughout the strait. And that is exactly what we're seeing play out in real time. Here's the part that I think deserves more attention than it gets in most coverage of this story. This is not just a numbers problem. It's a fundamental mismatch in the economics and physics of naval warfare. The US Navy's primary surface combatants in the Persian Gulf right now are destroyers and cruisers. These are extraordinary vessels, packed with radar systems, missiles, and electronic warfare suites. They cost between $1 and $2 billion each. Every Tomahawk cruise missile they fire costs approximately $2 million. The IRGC speedboat that fired on a tanker last weekend probably cost less than $100,000. The rocket it fired? A few thousand at most. That economic imbalance is not an accident. It is the entire strategic point. The constant threat from Iran's Mosquito fleet forces the US to keep its warships away from the strait, complicating the blockade enforcement it is trying to maintain. Sharq al-Awsat, and there's a defensive gap that's even harder to solve. Commercial ships, the tankers and container vessels that carry the world's oil and goods, have essentially no defense against a fast attack boat closing at 100 knots. Their crews are not military. They carry no weapons. They cannot outrun something moving 3 times faster. And the moment they make an emergency turn in the narrow confines of the strait, they risk collision with other vessels or running aground. The Mosquito fleet doesn't need to sink ships to be effective. It just needs to make ship captains and maritime insurers decide the risk isn't worth it. And that's exactly what it's doing. So let's zoom all the way out and connect this to what it means for everyone watching this video, wherever in the world you are. The Strait of Hormuz, in normal times, carries around 20% of the world's seaborne oil and 20% of global liquefied natural gas through a passage that is just 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. That single waterway is the circulatory system for a massive chunk of global energy supply. Since the IRGC speedboats started enforcing Iran's closure of the strait, shipping traffic has collapsed by over 90% from pre-war levels. The economic consequences compound every single day it remains closed. Oil prices have surged, shipping insurance costs have exploded. Alternative routes, going around the Cape of Good Hope in southern Africa, add weeks and enormous costs to every delivery. Food prices, manufacturing costs, heating bills, all of it is connected to what those speedboats are doing in those waters.
And here's the uncomfortable truth that cuts through all of the military press briefings. Iran's ability to control traffic through the Strait of Hormuz has caused global oil prices to nearly double and represents Iran's most significant strategic gain in this entire war, accomplished primarily by IRGC fast attack craft employing direct fire against tankers without necessarily requiring the use of missiles or drones. Sharq al-Awsat, not nuclear weapons, not ballistic missiles, not sophisticated electronic warfare, speedboats.
Cheap, fast, hidden speedboats operated by a guerrilla navy that has been preparing for exactly this scenario for 40 years. Trump declared the Iranian navy is at the bottom of the sea, and in one sense, the conventional navy, that's largely true. But the force that is actually controlling the strait right now, the force that is holding 20% of the world's oil supply hostage, that force is very much alive. Hidden in caves, tucked into island coves, ready to launch at a moment's notice. And until there's a diplomatic resolution, or until someone figures out how to neutralize hundreds of small, fast, radar-invisible boats hiding in rocky coastlines, they're not going anywhere. That is the real story of the Strait of Hormuz, not the ballistic missiles, not the nuclear program, the Mosquito fleet.
Thoughtful, if this gave you a clearer picture of what's actually happening in those waters, subscribe, share it with someone trying to follow this story, and I'll see you in the next one.